Halloween 2 by Jack Martin. Chapter 5. The producer floored the gas pedal of her Valiant and left the circus behind her. In her rearview mirror she saw the last of the police lights bouncing off the Wallace and Doyle homes. "A hot time in Hicksville," she muttered. She flicked on the radio. Music blipped past, songs about love or the lack of it. Too much or too little, too late or too soon. The old story. She glanced up. Ahead, a squad car was parked across the intersection of 10th and Orange Grove. She left her foot on the accelerator and slid her hands to the top of the wheel as if preparing to run it. An officer climbed out of the car and flagged her down. She sighed and eased up her right foot. She rolled down her window and pointed to the card in the window on top of her dash. "Press," she said. The officer trained his flashlight in her face. "You alone?" "What does it look like?" she said. He sauntered around the car, hitting the dirty windows with his beam. "You're with the press, you say?" "WWAR. Don't tell me you're going to ask for my registration at a time like this." "Nice night," he said. "Yes," she said, "it sure is. It might rain tomorrow. Christmas is coming in a month and a half. Listen, can I pass? I've got to get to Haddenfield Memorial. I'm sure you know there's been a—" "Not a very safe night, though, to be out, alone and all. Pretty young thing like you." "I'm sorry. It's been a long day. Night." She shielded her eyes from the flashlight and tried another tact. "Your name's Redding, isn't it?" "Yes, ma'am." "I thought so. I remember you from that snake hunt out in Russellville last summer. Or was it the two-headed calf story over in Hardin?" She sat up in her seat, unbuttoning another notch on her blouse. "Have you been on this case from the beginning?" "Since the break-in at Stoddard's this morning, yes, ma'am. You know, Sheriff Brackett left orders with the Highway Patrol to keep reporters away from the hospital till tomorrow. He wants to talk to that Strode girl first. If I were you, You're not. I'm glad you're not. Lucky for you. Well, I've got to get back to the station. Late updates and all that. You know how it is." The deputy made a note of her license plate. "Well, you go ahead, then," he said, reluctantly. "Just be sure you stay on the main road and don't go picking up any hitchhikers. You see any suspicious characters, you report it to—" "I'll report it straight to you. Or Sheriff Brackett, whatever." She eased in the clutch and dropped into gear. The deputy tipped his hat. "You have a nice night now, here." She started rolling. "Wait a minute," called the deputy. She groaned. "Is anything wrong, officer?" "Better get that left front tire checked. She's running pretty low." "I'll do that." She waited. "Thank you very much." "Be glad to give you a hand if you'll pull over to the side. About ready to be relieved here anyway. How's your spare?" "My spare's fine. I'll do it myself. I'll stop off on the way. I need gas anyway." "No stations open around here this time of night, ma'am." "I know where there's one. Hey, I'll bet you'd make a great interview for the special report tomorrow morning. Someone like you who knows everything about what's going on. Have you ever seen yourself on television?" "I'd probably have to check with the captain." "You do that, and then check with us. With me. Or I'll call you. Don't call us, okay? We'll call you." Before he could change his mind, she drew away smoothly, waving out the window. "Hicks, nicks, picks, and sticks," she said to herself. She drove on. His red light faded in the distance, finally obscured by trees, or by shadows across her back window. Shadows of whatever was in the back seat. Boxes, or... Her eyes froze on the mirror. As a band of light from a Mercury street lamp wavered across the rear upholstery, she reached up and panned the mirror from right to left, coming to a stop at her own stark face. There was a shape in the back seat. 5, she said. 4, 3, 2, 1. She spun around. It was her jacket. It was wadded up against the armrest. As she slowed, it slithered down to the floorboard. "Hick cop," she said. "Could have at least checked the back seat." She set her shoulders and bore down on the white line. The periphery of Haddenfield slipped past like a speeded-up film strip. A railroad crossing with an X marking the spot. An out-of-business Dairy Queen. A 24-hour laundromat with pale, aqueous lights behind the machines. As she passed, the reflected image of her taillights smeared a red after-image across the sign in the window. "Happy Halloween," said the sign. She groped for the cassette tape recorder on the seat next to her. Her fingers found the microphone and mashed the record button. "Special feature on Haddenfield slasher," she said. "Open on a montage of the town, city streets in slow-mo, businesses all closed, handheld shots moving, use Jeff's car. Portapack 2, number 1's losing its charge again. Let's see. Voiceover, use Monday. No, my own voice. No, get a local with the right accent. Talking about what it's like growing up in this armpit. Strike that. In this typical American town. Then segue into music. Pop tunes since the 50s, ending on current top 40. Again, she toyed with the dashboard radio. Still more of the same. A disco, some new wave country and western. A lot of country and western. No, she said. That's the wrong sound. It's got to be nostalgic. Let's see. She turned the dial to an oldies station. Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream. Make him the cutest that I've ever seen. She turned off the radio. She heard a dull clicking sound. Great, she said. No more tape. She knuckled the off button. The clicking persisted, louder, more insistent. It began to rock the car. This, she said, I simply do not believe. She steered to the side. She got out. The moon was sinking into the top of an oak tree, the edges of its face eaten away like Swiss cheese by the chattering leaves. There was no one around, nothing. A desolate intersection on the outskirts of town, with a boarded-up beer bar on one corner, a barber shop with its crimson-striped pole on the other, a weenie wigwam fast food stand, a mobile home trailer park with a sign that said, Dry Lawn Acres. She walked through the misty beams of her headlights. They were yellow and none too steady. The battery was on its last legs. The dusty gravel in front of the car cast long, jagged shadows, like hundreds of extracted teeth. Bitchin' short, Deb, she said to herself. She walked all the way around. The left front tire was flat as a pancake. The sidewall was cracked out from the rim, and a dirty smell of burning rubber wafted into her nostrils, along with the rich, ripe aroma that left no doubt a dairy farm was nearby. The man, she said, was right. Give him a gold star for that one. She sighed, a sigh that was like all the breaths she had ever drawn going out at once. Way to go, Deb, always in a hurry, but like they say, you'll be late for your own funeral. She leaned in and shut off the ignition and retrieved the keys. The car creaked, settling. She heard another sound then, a faint cry from the bushes behind the car. She killed her lights and tried to make out its source as she shuffled back to the trunk. The cry grew louder. She started to key the trunk, eager to be out of this place. The cry became a scream. She took a look over her shoulder. A red eye appeared over the crest over the hill she had just driven. It was racing toward her down the middle of the road. She saw lettering growing larger. ECNALUBMA. The red light spun past her and raced like a wolverine through the intersection without stopping. It cornered on two wheels, then disappeared, carrying its screaming siren with it. Thanks, she said. I needed that. Don't worry about me. No time to lose, boys, when you got a couple of dead ones for the morgue. As soon as she touched it, the trunk lid opened like a jaw. Inside were two old tennis rackets, an empty can of tennis balls, a deflated football, a frisbee, a ruptured styrofoam ice chest, and an old blanket covering God knows what. God knows what, she said. She found the jack. The handle was impregnated with coarse black grease. It scraped off under her nails like congealed fat. One of her nails broke. Right, she said. She kicked the jack under the ass end of the car and started pumping. Suddenly she saw her own shadow drawn in bas relief against the pavement as new lights approached. The gutter was full of refuse, an old TV guide, a plastic six-pack ring, an empty pack of Big Red chewing gum, a rotting translucent balloon, a matchbook from the Rabbit and Red Lounge. She pumped and pumped. The car was about 2 inches higher. A red Ford pickup truck whooshed past, blaring a Marshall Tucker tune, Rumors Are Raging About You and Me. The producer raised a dirty hand and gave it the finger in passing. Brakes grabbed. Tire treads bit the road. The truck backed up, bringing Marshall Tucker with it. Hi, are you? A heavy-duty hee-haw from the cab. "That's right," muttered the producer to herself. "Sit there and watch. It's a spectator sport. Didn't you know that?" The truck's door opened, closed. It sounded like the side of a tank slamming shut. "Out of the frying pan," she said to herself, "and into the fucking fire." She raised her head. "Hi yourself." He posed there, backlighting by his own headlights. A burly guy, early 30s, mustache, the kind that droops down over the upper lip like a sieve until it bleaches out from too much beer. A red plaid wool jacket, a Toronto Maple Leafs cap. He looked like he handled heavy machinery for a living. "Oh, great, great," she said. The driver took a long pull from the bottle of Moosehead and smacked his lips. "Not bad so far," he chuckled. Chortled is more the word. "Nothing like a squeeze who's good with her hands. That's what I always say." He handed her his Moosehead. "Thanks," she said. "I guess." He gave her a slow smile and licked his lips. Then he planted his boots on either side of the jack and wrapped his chunky fingers around the bar. With a series of sure flexions, he drove the bumper up until darkness showed under the collapsed tire. "Guess you'll owe me one," he winked. "Guess I will," she said. "I think the spare's in back." He bent over and spun off the lug nuts with the jack handle. The way they twirled into his fingers, it was like he was catching watermelon seeds. He stood and hiked up his jeans and held out his empty hand. She gave him back the beer bottle. "You do that really well," she said. "Don't I, though? You should see me when I really get into it." He drank another third of the beer and set it inside the open trunk, rolled out the spare, bounced it to the front. She followed. "I'll watch you so I'll know how it's done." "You sure you never done this before?" he said. He was down low, looking up her skirt. She stepped back. He lined up the holes and reached for a nut. His hand brushed her ankle. His calloused skin caught against her nylons. She ignored it. When the hand spidered up toward the back of her knee, she high-stepped so that her hip bumped the car and very nearly knocked it off the jack. "So," he said, "trick or treat." "That's it," she said, her voice rising forcefully. "Okay, all right, listen." Her slender hands patched the air. "I didn't ask you to stop." "Who's complaining?" "I could have done it myself, so why don't you just get back in your truck and roll on out of here now?" He looked her up and down, his eyes rolling over her body like ball bearings. He came to a conclusion. He stood. He dropped the jack handle. It twanged on the ground. He held out his dirty hands, palms up, and shrugged. "Happy Halloween," he said. She moved away from him. Her dress whispered against the metal of the car. "Don't get your pretty little dress dirty," was the last thing he said. She watched the pickup as it spit gravel and crossed the intersection. She watched it until it was completely out of sight. Her nostrils were flaring and tears of rage were welling in her eyes. "Fuck," she said. "You." She snatched up the jack handle. When she was finished, she tightened the lug nuts and lowered the bumper. She rattled the jack free and carried it back to the trunk. "Huh," she said. "Forgot your beer, didn't you, asshole?" She looked inside the trunk. The beer bottle he had left there was gone. She puzzled over this for a second or two. "How did he do that?" she said to herself. "I didn't see him go back. Sleight of hand artist. Boy, wasn't he. Oh well." Her hands were now black as coal. She reached for the corner of the blanket to wipe them. She yanked it. The blanket fell away. A shape the size of a mountain on two legs unfolded inside the trunk. It rose up and up. Then it sprang. It took her head back by the hair. Her white throat was suddenly exposed. A flash of silver, and her throat had been slashed with such brutal force that her head was nearly severed from her shoulders. It happened like that, and then it was over. More quickly than the eye or any camera could have recorded, even in slow-mo. There was a jingling of keys. A moment later, the car was running again. In the staff lounge at Haddenfield Memorial, the movie was still running. On screen, a tall man in a black coat led a group of slow-moving ghouls toward an old house. The house was fortified with boarded-up windows and a barricaded door, but the ghouls were not deterred. The tall man's arms extended stiffly. He approached the porch with hungry determination. "You ought to watch this flick," said the ambulance driver, Bud. "You might learn something." "Like what?" said Janet. She was staring past the set, preoccupied. "Like how to deal with, junk that goes bump in the night. Dead people, for instance." "Some of us don't have to turn on the television set for that sort of thing," said Janet. "Some of us get enough of that right here." "Yeah, about sick people, messed up people. But the ones Jimmy and I had to deal with tonight, hey, they were really messed up. They were dead." "Why don't you knock it off?" said Jimmy irritably. "Yes, please," said Janet. "You don't have to dwell on it." Bud took a long toke from his joint. "It's not like it's just a wind that's passing through," he said, sucking his breath in. "It's all around you. I found that out in NAM. Look at that, dude." On the screen, a lanky black man, the hero of the film, lit a torch and thrust it at the walking dead on the porch. They fell back temporarily. "He knows the score, that guy. Fight fire with fire. The cops know that too. When they get the guy that did it, they're going to burn his ass good. It's the only thing creeps like that understand." "They already got him," Jimmy said. "Yeah? Then why are all those cops still terranassing around town? Listen, you can hear the sirens. He's still out there. Take old Bud's word for it. Oh, watch this part. It's good." A shot of hands groping through cracks and walls. More boards hastily nailed up. Gunfire and screams. Lots of screams. "Turn it off," said Janet. "No way. Wait till you see the good part. Pretty soon, they start eating people. Fingers, guts." "You're disgusting." Bud shrugged and clamped the end of his joint in a hemostat and fired it again with his Bic. "Don't get on my case," he said. "I'm only telling it for real." He offered the joint to Jimmy. "Ain't that right, college boy?" "No," said Jimmy. The movie cut away to another bulletin. In the aftermath of the killings, the streets between Chestnut and 10th are jammed with people and cars. "Speaking of eating," said Bud, "I sure could go for a pizza now. Nice big one with sausage, onions, peppers, but no mushrooms. Fucking hate mushrooms." Jimmy ignored him and got up. He began pacing. The live newscast cut to a remote shot of a street corner. It was roadblocked against a stream of automobile headlights. More police cars were arriving to bolster the traffic barricades. This is usually a quiet, peaceful street, but tonight the neighbors were stunned by the gruesome sight of 3 bodies being wheeled out of this house. The names of the young victims have not yet been released, but people in the crowd have recognized them as neighborhood teens. I'm told that they were all friendly kids who lived nearby, one of whom may have been babysitting here tonight. "Looks like a goddamn homecoming," said Bud. Janet could not finish her Coke. "I gotta go," she said, but she made no move. She was tired and nervous from waiting to see what would happen next. By the look on her face, the announcement only confused her more. "So go," said Bud. Jimmy looked up and down the hall. He came back in. Over their heads, the diffused lighting flickered and buzzed, as if an insect were trapped inside one of the neon tubes. "Julie saw him, said Janet very seriously. "Who?" said Bud. "Michael Myers? Come on." "I swear, yesterday when she was coming to work." Her eyes were large and fixed, seeing it. "Where did she see him?" "You know the shopping bag out by the mall? She stopped at the light and saw him walking in that field behind the Lost River Drive-In. Julie said he was so creepy." "Julie's full of shit. He didn't escape until last night." "You don't have to swear about it." "She's a goddamn moron anyway." Janet's face boiled with barely suppressed revulsion. "Every other word you say is either hell or shit or damn." "Sorry, I guess I just fuck up all the time. Oops." Janet gave up. She stood and left the lounge. "Bye." "Bye," said Bud after she had gone. "Why don't you just rest your mouth for a while?" said Jimmy. "Everybody's pretty uptight tonight. You're not helping things." "There's one thing that'll help me tonight. Two things. Karen, where are you and those humongous titties of yours?" Meanwhile, in the town square near the shopping center, a few pedestrians were still in motion. Some were in costume. Whether the pirates and assorted ghouls and demons had not yet gone home from trick-or-treating, or whether they had been called back once only to sneak out for a second round of make-believe mayhem, was impossible to determine. But it was obvious that spirits were high, movements were jerky and angular, the silhouettes of their costumes blowing in the wind like tattered pennants of unknown design, so that the shadowed sidewalks and dark awnings and gaping caverns of doorways appeared to be alive with restless, furtive activity. Here, echoing footsteps so quick and faint they might have belonged to running mice, tapped in secret procession between a hardware store and a gift shop. There, fading laughter not unlike demonic giggling sounded across the impenetrable distance between sidewalk and parking lot. And there, the afterimage of a scurrying witch's glance lingered under a totem lamp-post, lighted from within and winking into invisibility when finally faced, like the contrail of a shooting star that falls across the evening sky only to disappear when confronted directly. And here, a nurse, whose name was Karen Bailey, already late for her shift at Memorial Hospital, in a rush toward her car, racing the hands of her wristwatch. She was tall and slender, physically presupposing, with a steady, efficient gait and a determined cant to her shoulders. Beside her, and 2 steps behind, was another young woman. "I cannot believe it. Pin the tail on the donkey and bobbing for apples. Actually bobbing in water, no less." "Oh, they have to use water so you can get the apples out of—" "I'm never going to another Halloween party as long as I live, especially at Stephen Mackle's house. And of course now I'm going to be late." Karen fished in her purse for the keys to her red Mustang. "You gotta drive me home first." "Oh, Darcy, I don't have time." "Well, you got to." Karen reached inside her open convertible and dropped her purse on top of her uniform. "Can't you ask Eddie Lee?" He's in Russellville." "It's 5 minutes to your house. Another 5 minutes back to the hospital. Mrs. Alves is going to kill me," said Karen despondently. "You promised me," said Darcy. "I know I did," sighed Karen. They got into the car without another word. The red Mustang pulled out. Neither driver nor passenger noticed the Valiant parked under a broken streetlight. Neither did the children who hunkered at the corner, busy dividing candy, nor the teenage boy who passed them on the sidewalk. He had on a straw hat that covered his face, raccoon-like, from the faint spill of overhead light, and as he walked he hoisted a battery-operated stereo radio with separate woofers and tweeters so that it was balanced on one shoulder inches from his ear. "Oh, Mr. Sandman," the radio was playing, an old song from the golden oldie stations. "Send me a dream, make him the cutest that I've ever seen." The side of his face blocked from view by the monstrous radio, the teenager looked straight ahead as he ambled past the children. Advertising neon blurred nearby. He did not turn his head. A tall, dark shape in a black coat was walking toward him on the sidewalk. The shape's arms were stiff at its sides, and its feet moved slowly and deliberately, as though weighted. As it passed through an unexpected circle of light from an electric pumpkin window display, its pale rubber mask seemed to undulate with a ghostly sheen. Its eye slits black as coal. The tuft of artificial hair sewn to the crown of the mask sprung out in comic abandon, creating a spiked aboriginal profile to the oversized head. But it was hardly an unusual mask in the town that night. Several exactly like it had been in the window of Stoddard's store only that morning before the break-in. The robbery had not received much attention on the news. Only one of the masks, some rope and a set of kitchen cutlery, were stolen. Not much in dollars and cents, and hardly worth the time. Sheriff Brackett wouldn't have spent that much time in answering the call. Chances were this teenager had passed the same mask in the window many times in the past few weeks. He had not paid any attention to the mask then. He didn't pay any attention now. The boy passed the shape without a second glance. The music went with him. The shape kept walking. At the end of the sidewalk there was a sign. It read, "Hospital." Okay, Slashaholics, this has been Chapter 5 of Halloween 2, the novelization by Jack Martin. Gotta say, I'm really enjoying this book. Halloween 2 is one of my favorite slasher movies because it introduced something that made all the Halloween movies, at least in my opinion, make a lot of sense. And that was it introduced the whole sibling storyline. And that made sense for why Michael was coming back and coming after Laurie and wanting to make sure that he finished his attempt at killing her. That was one of my biggest pet peeves about the Halloween 2018 sequel remake, or the requel, or whatever you call it, the new part 2, that they took that part out, the whole sibling storyline. Because I'm like, wait a second. So Michael Myers, 40 years ago, kills a bunch of random teenagers. One of the random teenagers doesn't die, so he obsesses over that one person for 40 years to go back and finish the job. Whenever he breaks out, he has a whole world that he can go murder. But, he doesn't even know for a fact this girl is still alive, but he's going to go track her down and kill her just so he can finish what he started. Not because he's related to her, not because he's trying to wipe out the bloodline, but because she just happened to get away from him 40 years ago. I just couldn't get into that. I loved it. I will say the movie was wonderfully done, paced very well, the suspense was great, but taking the sibling story out of it, in my opinion, was a big mistake, because honestly, whenever he broke out in the 2018 version, he had the whole world to kill. In fact, he killed a few people. Why did he care if she died or not? How did he even know she was still alive? At least whenever it was his sister, it made sense why he kept coming back after her. Because he wanted to wipe out the bloodline. So yeah, that was my biggest pet peeve with the new Halloween 2, the 2018. And that's why I love the original Halloween 2 so much, because of that storyline. And we're getting to that part coming up pretty soon in the book, I know by watching the movie, and I'm excited for that. I'm looking forward to it. Michael is at the hospital, and things are about to get interesting. So let me know what you guys thought of tonight's upload in the comment section below, and I'll be back very soon with the next chapter or so of Halloween 2. As always, tonight's upload was brought to you by our patrons on the Patreon page. That's Carl Eakins, Catherine McClear, Cecilia Spears, Sean Campbell, Hawaii, Iron Alexa, and our newest patron, Allison Sibe. Thank you so much, you guys, for supporting the channel on Patreon. And hey, if you're listening right now and you would like to become a patron and get some awesome rewards for doing so, you can sign up on Patreon and support the channel for as low as $2 to $5 per month. You get early access to some great slasher books. Right now, I'm doing early access for patrons. I'm giving them weekly uploads of Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, also written by Jack Martin. Alright guys, until next time, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon.